Good afternoon. My name is Frits van Evert. I work at Wageningen University and Research in Wageningen, the Netherlands. And I would like to start with a big thank you to Gıda for inviting me here today to be at this university on the Bosporus. And I'd like to thank also the Consulate General of the Netherlands for providing support for us to come here today. I will be talking to you about precision agriculture and a little bit about robotics in agriculture and food. And potatoes is one of the most important crops in the Netherlands, or maybe the most important crop in the Netherlands. So I wanted to start by showing you a picture of that to begin with. But don't forget some of the other very important industries, farming industries in the Netherlands. Dairy farming is an important one, and to me, the Netherlands is always green with black and white cows grazing tranquilly in a blue sky and so on. So that's what I have here. But I know that to many people around the world, the Netherlands is the land of tulips. And that doesn't seem to be quite fair when I'm here in Istanbul, because it's in the originally, of course, there are no tulips in the Netherlands. And they were only brought to the Netherlands in the 16th century when diplomats from the Netherlands traveled to Istanbul, Constantinople, and saw the beautiful flowers that were here and at the Ottoman court. Okay, so lots of fun and good things with agriculture, but there's also some things that are going wrong. And I didn't put a specific slide up about that because you all know that agriculture has a large negative impact on agriculture, the way we're doing it right now. It uses a lot of pesticides, it uses a lot of fertilizers that end up in waterways and so on, causes erosion. And even with all those things, we're doing a good job of feeding people, but not good enough, because still people in the world are going hungry, about 1 in 8, according to the United Nations. And the number of people is going up, so even to just keep where we are, we will need to increase the amount of food that we produce. And at the same time, we need to reduce the impact. So basically, we need to produce more and waste less. That sounds difficult enough, but there are lots of other things that we need to do at the same time. We need to think about the income of farmers. We don't want to end up with an agricultural industry which in some way or other makes farmers into slaves, wage slaves. We need to look at food prices. Food is cheaper at this point in history in many parts of the world than it has been ever. But at the same time, not everybody has enough money to buy. So we don't really want food prices to increase. And then there's people that say, well, we don't want these big industrial farms. We would like family farms to be able to continue to exist. You might be concerned about animal welfare. It may be very economical or efficient to put a cow in a small space and not let it move around, but not everybody is happy with that situation. We want to have an attractive landscape where it's nice to look at when you drive, or you go for bicycle rides or whatever you want to see. So there's lots and lots of things that we want to do with agriculture. But they all boil down to that we need to produce more and waste less. And in the rest of my talk, I will talk about precision agriculture and about agri-food robotics as means, as one of the ways, or two of the ways if you want, to achieve that goal. And in the last part of my talk, I will also spend some time on explaining the kind of work that we do to make it work in practice. Because as Sjaak has already highlighted, just having the technology is not enough. We need to work, we need to take certain action in order to make it work in practice. So we all have an idea what precision agriculture means, and lots of people have drawn up pretty pictures of their concept of precision agriculture, but often it boils down to having satellites in the sky, maybe drones, having some sensors on the soil, and doing something with applying fertilizer here, more fertilizer here, then more, and then there. And if we look at the process that is going on there, it's something like this. It starts with measuring things, the blue part of the slide. Then you do some with that information, you process it, you come up with a conclusion like I need to apply some fertilizer on this particular part of the field. That's the red part of the field. Then in the green part, you apply, you make that decision work in practice. And then, of course, once you've done something in the field, then you go back and you monitor the effect, you observe the effect. And that is a cycle, and the ultimate aim of this whole cycle, which can take place in weeks or in months or in years, the whole aim of this cycle is to apply exactly the right amount on the right time at the right place, and using the right substances. These are 4 precision agriculture techniques that are available to farmers at a practical level in the Netherlands today. They're all implemented. On the top left, the variable rate application of herbicides to the soil. You apply these before the crop is planted, and they prevent weeds from coming up. The application of fungicides to keep diseases away. The application of nitrogen when the crop is already on the field. And the application of herbicides to kill the potatoes at the end of the season. We made some calculations. These are things that are available to farmers now, and in that I mean that the commercial machines available to make this work, they are available. The knowledge is available. It has been tested in scientific experiments as well on farm, and the suppliers are in place that need to offer services for flying with a drone or something like that. That whole cycle is available to farmers at this point in time. And that means that we can also estimate or actually calculate what the benefits would be if all farmers started using these techniques. And basically it means that you can increase the profitability or the gross margin by about 20%. And that you can reduce the effect on the environment by about 20% also. So let me, I want to go in a little bit more detail in 3 of those applications that I just showed on this screen. The first one is the application of top-dressed nitrogen to potatoes. The standard way of applying nitrogen fertilizer to potatoes is by applying all the fertilizer that the plant needs at planting or even before planting. But that is hardly ever the right amount, because in some years the crop needs more than that, and in some years it needs less than that. This has to do with the uncertain weather conditions and the uncertain amount of nitrogen that is delivered from the soil, and this cannot be known in advance. Sorry. So what we do now is we recommend that farmers do not apply all that nitrogen at planting, but only about 2/3 at the beginning of the growth season, and then wait until later in the growing season and measure how much the plant has taken up and whether it needs more. So the reason that the potatoes need different amounts of fertilizer every year is one is the weather in the season, and the other one is variation in the soil. You can see on this map, which shows organic matter content of the soil, that on this field, which is about 600 meters long, that there are patches where there's a lot of organic matter in the soil and therefore a lot of supply of nitrogen from the soil, and that there's patches with less. So there's 2 reasons why you want to go in different places of the field and measure how the crop is doing. Because if you apply too little nitrogen, your yield will be suboptimal, and basically you will suffer an economic loss. If you apply too much nitrogen, you will incur environmental damage, nitrogen in the groundwater, for example. and you've spent money on fertilizer that you don't need, so that's also uneconomical. So the solution is to wait till to apply 2/3 of the amount of nitrogen that you think that the crop is going to need at planting, and then wait till about the 1st of July, and then fly a drone over the field, which measures the amount of light that is reflected, the sunlight coming in from the top. It's reflected by the crop, and just how much of each of the colors of light is reflected depends on the amount of nitrogen that is in the crop. So you can see how the crop is doing. And then you can make a map. This is a similar field as I showed earlier. You can make a map of the field from the drone image, which shows you exactly how much nitrogen in kilograms per hectare is available, has been taken up by the crop at that point in time. And then we can make a projection of how fast will the crop grow from here, from this point in time, from the 1st of July to the end of the growing season. And that depends, again, it depends on the weather, how that crop is going to do. So we have models that can predict that. And then you can have in the green bar, you can see how much nitrogen is needed for crop growth in this particular year, on this particular location. In the sort of orange color, you can see how much nitrogen has already been taken up by the crop. We've measured that with the drone. And then in the blue part of the bars, you can see this much nitrogen still needs to be applied to the crop. So you can make a map of that again, load it up to the tractor, drive over the field, and apply exactly the right amount of nitrogen on each part of the field. This is a potato leaf that has been damaged by late blight, Phytophthora infestans. It's a fungus-like disease which is basically always present in the Netherlands, and it starts to grow as soon as it's wet and the right temperature, not too cold, not too warm. Once it starts growing, it basically wipes out the entire crop. Everything becomes black. This is late blight. This is the disease that caused the Irish famine in the 1860s, the potato famine. And so in order to prevent that from happening, farmers apply a fungicide. And not just once, but maybe 10 times or maybe 15 times every season. And it's an expensive stuff. It's also bad for the environment. So this Phytophthora is causing a lot of the environmental damage of the potato growing. So we've developed a warning system which tracks from day to day and 7 days into the future what are the growing conditions for the Phytophthora. And then the result is shown in the green bar up the top with the dates in there. So as long as that bar is green, you're fine. But when the late blight model that's behind this detects that the temperature is sufficiently, the growing conditions are such that the disease will start growing, then it will become yellow. That will be 2 or 3 days in the future, and it gives farmers a warning. It says you need to spray now in order to make sure that in 2 or 3 day time the Phytophthora will not start to develop. If you don't do that, then it will say then the next day you're in an orange situation and you need to basically use a pretty heavy, more expensive fungicide. And if you don't do that, then by the red color, your crop will be dead. And this is another application that farmers are actually quite happily using in the Netherlands. Potato is a crop that grows for a long time. It's unlike wheat or soybeans, for example, that flower and then start making a fruit and then they stop. Potatoes stay green for a long time, which in the Netherlands means if you wait for the winter to set in and the crop to die, by that time the soil would be too wet and you can't harvest potatoes anymore. So what happens in practice, in about well, you start giving potatoes not too much nitrogen so that they start dying off a little bit. And then by August or September, you use an herbicide to kill the vines. If the potato crop is still very green at the time that you decide to kill it, like on the right there, then you need to use a lot of herbicide. But if it's already half dead, like in the middle or completely dead, well, that's like on the left picture, then you can reduce the amount of herbicide that you use. So we have developed a relationship, which is shown in this graph actually, between something that you can measure on the horizontal axis and the amount of herbicide that you need to kill the plant, to kill the crop effectively on the vertical axis. And so then the potato flow for precision agriculture, the workflow for precision agriculture potato home killing becomes that you take a drone, you fly it, you make a map of the greenness of the crop, something that the drone measures, that's on the bottom left. From that, you make a map of how many liters per hectare you need to apply of the herbicide on each spot of the field, that's on the bottom right. Then you go to your spraying rig and you execute your action, and you end up with a, beautiful is maybe not the right word, but an efficiently killed potato crop which can be harvested. And if you do it in this way, then you use about half the amount of herbicide that you would use if you would just spray the whole field with the same rate of herbicide. Now, I need to take another. So in these three examples that I've showed you, we have used very simple models, basically a line connecting something that you measure and something that you need to do. But we want to go further than that now. And to make our recommendations more precise, we're going to need more complex, more detailed models. And these more complex models, so our goal is to simulate potato growth with these complex models on any commercial field. But these complex models also need more input numbers. They need to have specific information about the crop. They need to have specific information about the soil. And it's easy to get that sort of information if you do an experiment. You just go out and measure all these things. But if you are dealing with thousands of farmers' fields, it's too much work and it would be too costly to do it on all those fields. So we need another method of getting the input for our complex models. And we're doing that. And we're working together with a farmer in this area. It's Van den Borne, Jacob van den Borne, farmer who farms about 600 hectares per year. And he's been collecting a lot of measurements on his field. From 2012 on, he knows what yields, well, exactly what he applied every year, what he harvested. He's also done a lot of destructive samples in the season, so we know we can follow the growth of the crops in those years. And he's measuring things on the soil, electrical conductivity, for example, which is something that which is related to the water characteristics of the soil. He measures also soil moisture itself, and he measures the yield of potatoes as you go along the field. And then you get a map, like on the right-hand side there, which shows for each part of the field what the yield was in tons per hectare. Right. Fairly basic information, any farmer could do that, but only Jacob at the moment is doing that at this scale. And we combine this information with satellite information. On the bottom left, it's not a very pretty picture, but it shows a farm field and a satellite image that's overlaying that. And we can calculate the biomass, how much crop is there on that field at that point in time. On the top graph, I'm showing you basically how much biomass there is on a number of fields over a number of years. You can see the cycle of planting and growing and dying again. And we can relate that number, which is measured with the satellite, to the amount of leaves that is available on the crop. That's with that little graph on the bottom right-hand side. That's a relationship that was established already many years ago by my colleagues. So basically we can look with a satellite at Jacob's fields and tell exactly how much leaf there was on that field in 2012, 2013, 2014, and so on. Then we can also look at how fast do leaves grow, for example. So here I'm showing on the horizontal axis basically time, and on the vertical axis the logarithm of the amount of leaves, the leaf area index. Now leaves grow in the beginning of the growing season exponentially. If you have something that's growing exponential and you take the logarithm of that, you get a straight line. So I'm showing you a straight line through those black dots there. Those black dots are is the amount of leaf on Jacob's fields in a number of fields as measured by the satellite. And by drawing a straight line to it, I can calculate how fast do the leaves grow. And that's a number that I can put in my crop growth model. So that's one important problem solved. The other problem is that there is spatial variability in the soils. So this is another field from Jacob's farm, and you can see that this was in 2012, no 2015, that there on this field there was variability in yield. There were some places with higher yield and some places with lower yield. On the right-hand side, I'm showing a soil electrical conductivity map of that same field, and you can see that there are places with low electrical conductivity and places with high electrical conductivity. Now we know that electrical conductivity is related to in this field to the depth of the soil to which the roots can penetrate. If they can go deeper, they can search for more water, they can find more nitrogen, they'll grow better. So now we have measurements that Jacob took with his combine, with his harvester. We have measurements from the satellite, we have measurements from the soil. We can put all that together using some intelligence and basically, okay, so this is still the satellite. And then we can come up with a map of that field where for each place we know what the soil depth is. And that's shown here on the right. And we basically have used now these very different sources of data to come up with a relationship between the soil electrical conductivity and the depth to which the roots of the plants can go. And this is another important input to our crop growth models. So we are now a big step closer to using these more complex models to support more detailed recommendations to farmers. So I want to switch topics and talk a little bit about agrofood robotics. It's a very short movie, so I'll play it again. Let me tell you, throughout history, a large amount of the time that farmers spent in the field has been spent on weeding. Walking to the field, taking out the weeds, killing them with a hoe, or picking them out with your hands, or doing something. And this machine, take a good look because it is a short movie. It consists of an implement behind the tractor, which has cameras and looks exactly where the plants are, and then uses a hoe to take away the weeds and leave the crop intact. So you can see the field of lettuces here, and this is from under the machine. This is something that doesn't happen overnight. This is a project on which Wageningen and Tecrübesi, which is the company, have worked for the last, I think almost 15 years. But it's a commercially available machine now, and it's selling reasonably well, I think. This is another situation with weeds. This is sugar beet plants in an early stage, and they are the plants in the rows. And you see that in between the rows and everywhere else, some potatoes are growing. So this is a field on which last year potatoes were grown, this year sugar beet, but some of the small tubers were not harvested. They stayed over in the winter and they start growing now. That's a bad thing, because now this sugar beet field can also harbor late blight and other diseases which are specific to potato. And we will not spray against late blight in the sugar beet field, of course. So this disease can continue here without problem, and in fact neighboring fields. So these volunteer potatoes, as they are called, they must go. And the traditional way of doing that is again walking to the field and using a hoe to cut all those potato plants off. A slightly more modern way of doing that is taking a little tank with glyphosate, with herbicide, and touching the various potato plants that you find. But still, it's a lot of work, it's costly, and if you don't do it well, you get a fine from the government because you are aiding and abetting late blight. So what we are working on is a machine that can detect those potato plants and see the difference between potato plants and sugar beet plants, which is difficult because both are green. And then use a small sprayer to put a herbicide only on the potato plant without touching the sugar beet, of course, because then you would hurt that one and you have a problem. So on the left you can see the pictures that are made by a camera in the blue box behind the tractor there. And where it's red, it says, no, that's not a sugar beet plant, and that's where I'm going to spray. So this works reasonably well. We've been working on that also for well, maybe close to 10 years. It's not good enough to have it work in practice, but we are still hoping that one day this will be better. No. And this is another situation with wheat. This is grassland for dairy cows, and in grass there is a weed called broadleaf dock, which grows. It's not a really big problem. You can use a little bit of herbicide and spray it, but on organic farms, organic dairy farms, farmers don't want to use herbicides. And then this weed starts to grow and becomes bigger and starts to grow in more places and so on. And so in the end, you have a really big problem. So we've worked on a robot, which you can see here, which has a camera in front, and it looks at the weeds and then it chops it up when it finds them. Again, not quite ready for the commercial big time. This is green peppers in the greenhouse. Don't have to tell you what this thing is doing. It's clear, I think. This is also, it's pretty close to being good enough for being used as a commercial product. You can see it's a little bit slow. That is the biggest disadvantage at the moment. Not so much the price. Of course, the upshot from a robot, even if it's slow, is that it can work day and night, and it doesn't go on strike, and it doesn't need other amenities that people need, and so on. And then we have many more examples of robots that we are working on. I cannot show them all today, so I just threw a few on this slide here. On the top left is an autonomous tractor for spraying in strawberries. Strawberries is another crop that needs a lot of herbicide, fungicide applications actually against botrytis. On the top right is a robot. Well, it's actually, it's an automated machine that's going to harvest broccolis, but only those broccolis which are of the right size to be harvested, and the other ones it will leave in the field so you can come back later. The bottom left is looking at diseases in potato, and the bottom right that was in an orchard situation. So, lots of beautiful technology. Not all of it quite ready to work on commercial farms, but some of it is getting pretty close. But it was already pointed out earlier this afternoon that just having this technology and then handing it to farmers is not enough. It's not a guarantee that these things are going to work and that they're going to be taken up then. So we actually spent a lot of effort on actions that are with the aim of making it work. And here's a slide that's gone missing, I think. Doesn't matter. This is a slide about our Akkerweb. Akkerweb, I don't have to make a slide for it because I can paint it to you in words. Think about your smartphone. When you open it up, you have a whole bunch of applications and you can pick on one to open your diary or do an email or whatever. Akkerweb is just like that, but then for farming, and it runs better on the internet, on a computer than on a telephone. But it has also applications that help you perform a particular task on your farm in precision farming. And so it has a bunch of layers on the top. It has this layer with apps, where I've put the screen and the person, so that's where the interaction with the user takes place. And in the end, it uses data, of course. Data about with satellites, data about the soil, data about drone images and so on. And those are the little database icons at the bottom of the graph. And you can see that some of those database icons are inside Akkerweb and some of them are outside. So this is meant to signify that we can connect to data sources outside Akkerweb. For example, weather data from somewhere else, soils data from somewhere else, soil sample, field lab data from somewhere else. And then in the middle, you see these blue lines that connect everything and the little gear icons that say that data is being processed. And Akkerweb, I should say, it is a product of a consortium, a not-for-profit foundation, which has two members. And one is Wageningen Research, and the other one is Agrifirm, which is the largest farmers cooperative in the Netherlands. So Agrifirm is jointly owned by Wageningen and by farmers, by researchers and by farmers. And why is that important? Well, first of all, it helped, of course, shape the development of Akkerweb, because farmers were there from the beginning. They were making comments and saying, we need this to do our business. Akkerweb takes away some of the technical barriers. If you fly a drone, that image can be uploaded to Akkerweb by the company that flies the drone. And Wageningen has the decision rule on how to use that data, implement it on Akkerweb. You can connect it with data collected by the government about what crop is growing where, which is also available in Akkerweb. So Akkerweb takes care of bringing all that stuff together. Akkerweb makes also very clear in its user agreement that whatever you upload, it is yours and yours alone and will never be shared with anybody else until the moment that you say you want it to. And this is for many farmers very important. Because there is this issue of ethics. It might be the right thing to do to share data with lots of other people and companies and so on, because data about what grows where and how well it responded to fertilizer and so on can be used to make better decisions by many other farmers in the future. So in that sense, it's a good thing, it's an ethical thing to share the data. But on the other hand, if you share your data, as thousands of farmers share the data and one company comes and picks up that data, that company has all of a sudden a lot of power now. This is a changing power relation that Sjaak mentioned earlier. And okay, maybe to some extent it's unavoidable, but it's nice if you stay in the driver's seat and if farmers can help decide how fast they want to move in this. So basically, Akkerweb is a trust mechanism. Wageningen is the partner that makes sure that that the decision rules that are in there are based on science. And Agrifirm ensures that the interests of stakeholders, the farmer stakeholders, are respected. This is some of the applications that are available on Akkerweb. You can look on AkkerWeb itself and find out more about the full list of applications. It's changing all the time anyway. But the point I wanted to make with this slide is that some of the apps are free and some cost money. Some are provided by AkkerWeb itself, and some are provided by other providers. And you can see Agrifirm is there, Bioscope, Syngenta. So it's an open platform also in the sense that you don't have to be either Agrifirm or Wageningen to put your application on here. Okay, and then, so this is an important step, having this AkkerWeb available to make the technical things and some of the social things happening. But that still is not enough. So the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture is financing now this project, the National Field Lab Precision Agriculture and PPL in Dutch. It's headed by my colleague Corné Kempenaar. And the aim of this project is to take away the last remaining barriers that are there to, that might be stopping farmers from adopting the precision agriculture techniques that we know are working. So it started last year with a big advertisement in the National Farmers Weekly. And it said, okay, we're looking for 6 farmers, 6 arable farmers that want to try 6 precision agriculture techniques. And the deal was that these farmers would make their own investments to buy machinery or buy advice or whatever they needed to buy, or maybe they had these things already. Anyway, it was their job to implement that precision agriculture technique. But if they ever run into any problem, then Wageningen experts are standing by to travel to the farm and help them solve it. So in the first year, these are the farmers. In the first year, the top line, we had 6 of them. This year, an additional 12 were, do I say right? No, 9 were requested. These are the precision agriculture techniques that they worked with in the first year. So some of those you've seen already, the top dress fertilizer, but also things with lime and nematicides and so on. And this is how it works then in the going of the project while it's being executed. So there's a lot of publicity in farmers' journals. There is a Facebook messages, and this is one of the experts traveling from Wageningen to one of the farmers, sitting down at the kitchen table and discussing, well, what did you measure? What did you think of it? Have you tried to implement it? What did you run into? And so on. There's a YouTube channel with lots of these movies. Unfortunately, they have not all been translated into English yet, but they're really nice material to look at. And this year, the project has also branched out into dairy farming with these applications here, and into flower bulbs. All right, before I come to my summary slide, I want to acknowledge at least some of the colleagues whose work I've shown here. And it falls actually in 2 groups. On the one hand, the Agrofood Robotics group, which has their own website, and you see them here. And on the other hand, the people that are more directly involved with precision agriculture per se. And I don't think I've got everybody there, but then it will be a very large group. There's some overlap, of course. If you look closely and take the time for that, you'll see some people that are in both groups. But in summary, I would say that a number of proven precision agriculture technologies are available to farmers in the Netherlands, mostly in potato, but we are branching out now to other crops. That in spite of these things being available, the adoption of variable rate technologies is still fairly low. We're talking perhaps tens or dozens of farmers, not hundreds. Some of the limitations that keep people from adopting these things are still due to that it's difficult, that it's you need to move from one kind of machine to another. It's not always completely clear that they're going to make money out of it. So on. And so we have several projects. I just showed you the one now, the most recent, the most important one, to stimulate adoption. And in terms of pure robotics, there's not really anything on the market yet, but there are so many exciting examples getting better all the time that I wouldn't be surprised if you very quickly you will see those also in the market. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.